Hello, everyone. Today, we will be discussing the impact of multinational corporations or MNC on both developed and developing countries. We'll draw on the perspective of key scholars such as Robert Gilpin, Wallace, Barnett, and Muller to examine both the positive and negative role of MNC in global economy and political relations. This topic is crucial because MNC are major players in shaping global trade, investment flows, and even political system. Let's begin by looking at the MNC in the context of developed countries. Robert Gilpin, from a realist perspective, see MNC as instrument of home countries' economic and political power. This means that MNCs are used to assert control over global trade, extending the reach of developed countries, sometimes resulting in what Gilpin called neocolonialism. Developing countries become dependent on developed nations through MNCs, which deepen global inequalities. In contrast, Wallace highlight economic interdependence, but emphasize that this interdependence is often asymmetrical. While MNC do foster connections between countries, Wallace argued that the developed nations tend to set the term of trade and investment. This imbalance can significantly limit the policy autonomy of developing countries, leaving them with fewer tools to manage their economy independently. Turning to the perspective of developing countries, Barnett and Muller provide a more critical view. In their seminal work, Global Reach, they argue that MNC represent a form of economic imperialism. Developing countries are often exploited of their resource, whether it's natural resource or cheap labor, while MNC reap the profits. This leads to a phenomenon known as dual economy, where part of the economy are geared toward global market, benefiting foreign corporations, but neglecting the local economy needs. This only exacerbates existing inequalities within developing countries. Now, let's take a look at the economic impact of MNC investment, which have both positive and negative dimensions. On the positive side, Gilpin argues that MNCs bring much needed capital to developing countries, promoting industrialization and economic growth. Furthermore, MNC can act as channel for technology transfer, modernizing the host country's economy by diffusing advanced technology. However, Barner and Muller cautions that the benefit may be limited. Profits from MNCs are often repatriated to the home countries, leaving developing nations with little to show for the investment. High-skill activities such as research and development remain in developed countries, while developing countries are left with labor-intensive and lower-value activities. This limits local development and keeps developing nations at a disadvantage. In addition, the economic impact MNC have significant political implications as well. According to Barnett and Muller, MNC create political dependence. When foreign firms wield so much influence, local government may prioritize corporate interests over public welfare, which can lead to clientelism and corruptions. This weakens democratic institutions and leads to governance issues. Gilpin also point out that MNC reduce the sovereignty of developing countries. When a nation is deeply dependent on MNC for its economic growth, its ability to enact independent policies that serve its national interest is compromised. Instead, global capitalists force start to dictate domestic policy. In terms of power dynamic, Gilpin and Wallace both highlight how MNC reinforce global inequalities. Gilpin argues that MNC perpetuate the dominance of developed nations over developing countries. Developed countries have more bargaining power, often forcing weaker nations to accept investment terms that favor the MNC rather than the host countries. Wallace extends this idea by introducing the concept of structural dependence. Developing countries rely heavily on foreign investment and technology. But this reliance locked them into a system where they remain dependent on the capital and technology of developed nations. This creates a cycle of dependency, limiting the capacity of developing countries to break free from unequal power structure. Barrett and Mueller further emphasized the environmental and social impact of MNC activities in developing countries. One major concern is environmental degradations. In their pursuit of profit, MNC often take advantage of weaker environmental regulation in developing nations. This leads to practice that cause long-term environmental damage, contributing to phenomena such as deforestation, pollution, and resource depletion. On the social front, MNC tend to increase social inequalities. While a small elite may benefit from this investment, the broader population face worsening working conditions, lower wage, and displacement from traditional livelihood. This creates deep societal division and foster discontent within the host countries. So what can be done to mitigate the challenge posed by MNC investment? Barnett and Mueller advocate for greater regulations. Developing countries need stronger labor laws to protect workers from exploitations, as well as stricter environmental regulations to prevent long-term ecological harm. Gilpin, on the other hand, offers more strategic recommendations. He suggests that developing countries negotiate better terms with MNC to ensure that more of the benefit stay with the host countries. Moreover, regional cooperations among developing nations through trade blocs or other alliances can increase their collective bargaining power when dealing with the MNCs. To wrap up, we've seen a range of perspectives on MNCs, from their positive potential for economic growth to their negative effect of sovereignty, inequality, and the environment. Barnett and Mueller highlight the exploitative nature of MNCs and their detrimental effect on developing nations' sovereignty. Gilpin emphasized the realist view that MNC reinforce the global power asymmetry, benefiting developed nations at the expense of developing ones. Wallace bring a structural perspective, arguing that the dependency created by MNCs lock developing nations into a system where they remain economically and politically subordinate. While MNC undoubtedly bring economic opportunity, they also contribute to power imbalance. Therefore, careful regulation and strategic negotiation are necessary to ensure that MNC investment align with the development of goal of host countries. Well, thank you for your attention. I hope this lecture provides a clear understanding of the complex role MNC plays in shaping global development. And for some kind of exercise, I would like to invite you to engage in important discussion about the concept of the race to the bottoms as it relates to multinational corporations. This phenomena occurs when countries compete to attract investment by lowering their regulatory standard, which can have significant implications for labor rights, environmental protections, and public welfare. For context, as MNC seeks to minimize the operational costs, they may choose to relocate their activities to countries with less stringent regulations. This puts pressure on countries with a higher standard to relax their regulation and to keep businessmen from leaving. This dynamic raises critical questions. How should government respond to the threat posed by this race to the bottom? Today, we will explore this question by discussing two primary policy options. The first one is international harmonization. This involves negotiating common regulatory standards among countries to prevent MNC from taking advantage of weaker regulation as well. Two, restricting MNC activities. This option suggests limiting foreign direct investment to ensure that government can maintain their own regulatory standard. What you can do, you can think of these two main questions. The first one, is regulatory arbitrage necessarily a bad thing for economic efficiency? Why or why not? This question will encourage you to consider both the potential benefit and drawback of MNC relocating to countries with lower regulations. 2. How easy or difficult will it be for government to agree on common regulatory standard? Think about the challenge involved in reaching consensus across different nations with varying economic needs and regulatory environments. Now you have time to think and also discuss your points. I encourage you to think critically and engage openly. After think about it, we will convene and present your positions in our classroom. Remember, the goal is not just to arrive at consensus, but to understand the complexities surrounding the issues and consider multiple perspectives. As you discuss it with your own peer or your friends, or in this context, in our class of political investment, consider what criticism your position might face and how would you defend your choice. Then this will help you to develop a well-rounded arguments. Thank you and good luck.